One of the big stories that broke during the week came courtesy of the manager of Vasyl Lomachenko, Agus Klimas, who told Steve Kim, and then the story broke elsewhere, that Lomachenko was not going to move forward with a planned fight against Gervonta Davis. This is something that representatives for Davis and Lomachenko have been negotiating. There was a tentative date of November something for that fight to happen. It would have been a major event, most likely in Las Vegas, title unification fight, huge opportunity for Gervonta to prove himself against somebody at the high level. And Corey, if you had told me a week ago that one of those two fighters was going to back away from the table on something like that, I would have said it was Gervonta Davis. I would have said Davis's team would have found some way to not take that type of fight, to not do business with Top Rank, and to come ahead or go ahead with a different type of fight. Instead, it's Lomachenko walking away. And his reasoning, to paraphrase Klimas, is effectively that he's kind of tired and his heart's not really in it. He's coming off that win earlier this year against George Kambosos in Australia. And now, instead of trying to move one step closer to becoming undisputed at 135, he is going to take at least the rest of this calendar year off. So I guess your reaction to Loma walking away from a Gervonta fight.
Yeah, I guess it's disappointing from a boxing standpoint because I think that would have been, let's say Tank wins that fight. That's kind of like the true silencer of his critics in terms of people who were questioning the true validity, not the validity of his wins, but the excellence of his victories thus far. That would have been the night to be able to prove it. But for Lomachenko, I mean, like it's been going on so long that I think we forget that there's some serious stuff happening in his home country. And if his heart isn't in it, because of a combination of what's going on at home, plus just the general amount of time that he spent in this sport, 400 plus amateur fights. And then, I mean, Lomachenko was a fixture on HBO. We're several iterations of boxing broadcasting beyond that, and Lomachenko is still a major player at 135 and chasing big fights. He's been at this a long time, so I do understand if for very obvious and very understandable reasons that his heart isn't in it right now. I get it.
Yeah, he's been a pro for 11 years, debuted in 2013, an amateur for much longer than that, multi-time gold medalist. Like, he has slept and drank boxing for his entire life. And, one of the things that people were saying in the aftermath of this announcement was that he probably didn't even want to take the Kambosos fight. Like, he took the Kambosos fight because his father wanted him to take that fight. So I can see a guy just being burnt out. I don't get the sense from talking to people that it has that much to do with what's going on in the Ukraine as much as it has to do with his own overall exhaustion, like with just mentally, physically, just not wanting to go in to another training camp to prepare for another big fight. If you remember, like after the loss to Devin Haney, like those images of Loma in the locker room were kind of heart-wrenching, right? Like he was in tears, like he was just broken up. Like that was his opportunity to become the undisputed champion, the goal that he has been chasing since he turned professional. Came up short, controversial decision. That kind of broke him, I think, that night. Did come back, dominated Kambosos, looked great against Kambosos. And if we're being honest, if he was going to fight Gervonta, I would make Loma the favorite. I know people would say like Gervonta will eventually get to him. Well, look, Loma's not going to come in reckless against Gervonta Davis like he did against George Kambosos. He will have an entirely different game plan for that specific type of fight. And I think he'd win most of the rounds in that fight. So if he can just avoid getting knocked out in like the final 3 or 4 rounds, I think he would win. But it is telling that, a fight of that magnitude that could be worth that much money, that would put him one step closer to becoming the undisputed champion. It makes me believe he's done, Corey. Like it makes me believe that there is no coming back. He's how old now? 36 at this point. I forget when he turns 37. As we said, been in the game for a long time. Wouldn't surprise me at all if we've seen the last of Lomachenko because, like, what's he going to do? Like, I guess theoretically, if Gervonta turned around and made a fight against Shakur Stevenson, which I'm skeptical of, he could fight the winner of that, and that would take him 2 steps closer to becoming the undisputed champion. But If your heart's not in it, your heart's not in it. And the last thing a fighter should do is get in the ring against dangerous fighters when you're just not all the way there. We've seen countless examples of fighters doing that and it ending very, very badly for them. So I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw the end of if this was the end of Lomachenko. If I had to guess, I'd say he probably does come back to defend that title early next year. But in a big fight, in a unification fight, I don't know, man. This might be the end of Loma.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If this type of fight, if this type of event with these stakes, if that doesn't get you up for fighting,
biggest fight you could make in the lightweight division.
Yeah, one of the biggest fights in boxing, period. If that doesn't get you up for fighting and for going back into the training camp, that does mean that your heart definitely is not in it, at least right now. And I guess it's harder to kind of wrap your head around now, although like whatever his reasons are, I'm totally cool with. But it's almost like it would have been nice for Lomachenko to have just had that kind of like legacy act swan song in front of a sold out stadium in Australia as his last fight. He wins a title and then says, I'm done. But it's because that got everyone's hopes up for the potential of a fight against Shakur, against Gervonta, against whoever else. And then now to kind of decide, okay, come to think of it, my heart's not in it. I don't really want to go through with it. That enables us to kind of do this like guesswork and whatnot. But yeah, it would have been kind of a tidier ending if indeed this is the end, for him to have said before the Kambosos fight, like, hey, I'm going out with this mega event. This is really cool. I get to fight on the other side of the world. I'll win a title. I'll go out as a world champion. He can still do that, but you're always going to have the people now. Say he walks away now, you are going to have fans who said he walked away because he was afraid of Tank. He didn't want to take that fight. He was ducking Tank, so he decided to walk away. We'll have to hear that discussion if indeed that does happen.
All right, I've got to tap your endless knowledge of Japanese boxing here to talk about the one-sided destruction that was the fight over in Japan this weekend with Junto Nakatani and Vincent Astrolabio, which ended in one round, a body shot from Nakatani, who successfully defends his bantamweight title in Japan. Nakatani is now, 28-0, 21 knockouts. He's got a resume that is eerily similar to the Japanese fighter one division above him in Naoya Inoue. I do a regular pound-for-pound ranking over at SI.com. I have had Nakatani in consideration for a number of months now. But after that performance against a credible guy in Astrolabio, not a world beater, but credible enough, followed by the previous knockout he had against Santiago, he defeats RG Cortez. I think we're now at that point where Nakatani feels like a top 10 guy, Corey. Like he feels like he belongs in most top 10 lists. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Like, to me, when I watch it, and I know that people construct their pound for pound lists in a variety of different ways, but when I watch Nakatani, I look at him and I think I'm watching one of the 10 best fighters on the planet right now in terms of skills and in terms of his resume. Like you said, I mean, he is destroying top 10 divisional fighters, and he's doing so in an exciting fashion. And with a style that's really interesting too. Is kind of it obviously has reference points in a very classical Japanese style, kind of that springy in and out movement. But having trained mostly with Rudy Hernandez in Los Angeles, there are elements of the school of thought from different places in the world, from the Mexican school of boxing. Like, he's just a really fun, really well-rounded fighter to watch. If he has a weakness, it's in his defense, and a lot of that is just because he's so damn big for the weight class. But listen, this is, I think, a really, really gifted, really talented, dangerous puncher in what the Japanese press is describing as the golden age of Japanese boxing right now, as I hold up my Japanese boxing periodicals. Listen, he's in a division now with 4 Japanese world champions, and he has the ability to unify that division, maybe become undisputed in that division. And a fight between him and the man you referenced, the monster, Naoya Inoue, if they can do that in a New Year's Eve time slot, that becomes one of the biggest fights in the history of the country.
Well, like what I mean, and what are we waiting for with that? I know that unification fights at 118 are easy for him to make, but there's three other champions at 118. Like, do we really want to spend that time collecting all those belts, all for the purpose of eventually going up to fighting Inoue? Like, I wouldn't. I know Inoue says he wants to fight 2 more years at 122. I wouldn't bank on that. Like, I wouldn't consider that the kind of wiggle room that I have to wait to make that fight. You've got Nakatani right now peaking. He's popular. He's strong. He's huge, like you said, for the weight class. He could easily make that jump to 122. Like, let's do it now, man. Like, let's go. Nakatani, Inoue, Tokyo Dome. Like, how many events in the U.S., forget boxing, how many events in the U.S. could put that many butts in the seats, right? Like, that's Super Bowl level type of interest over there for that type of fight. If I'm, the managers and the promoters for Nakatani and Inoue, I let Inoue get through this fight against TJ Dahani. He's probably going to win that fight, probably spectacularly. And then I'm saying to Nakatani, like, let's go. Let's make it happen. You move up in weight. We'll have you're a champ at 118. I'm undisputed at 122. Let's make it happen. Like, I wouldn't wait a single extra month to make that fight happen.
Yeah, and I think that Nakatani is game for that. I think that the question, and this is not to suggest that like Inoue is afraid of Nakatani or whatever, but he is kind of the man that holds the power in this scenario. And if he decides he wants to fight Nakatani, then I think that fight will happen because it seems like Junto is game for it. He called out Inoue. He's saying the right things, and the whispers within the Japanese press, they're pointing or they're hoping for New Year's 2025, a big splash event. And we've seen when this type of thing happens, when two meteors clash in Japanese boxing, you mentioned Super Bowl numbers. That's what we saw. I mean, really the fight that they would be chasing in terms of biggest fight in the history of Japanese boxing would be Koki Kameda versus Daisuke Naito back in 2009. And it did if I'm off the top of my head, a 43.7 share on TBS. Those are Super Bowl numbers. Mm-hmm. That's nearly 50% of the country that has that channel and has a television had it on watching that fight. So those are monstrous numbers that they're chasing. And if it's not on, basic cable, maybe it doesn't hit those levels. But in terms of the buzz, I think that it hits that kind of level. That's the kind of event that could be created if these two choose to get in the ring with one another soon.